Hey, this is Crazy Horse. Let's talk about Silicon Valley Bank. Is it a bank run or a controlled demolition? I'll let you decide. Just a week or two before the bank failed, several executives sold off large blocks of their stock in SVB. Let's take a look at that. And while they were doing that, the mainstream media and Jim Cramer were telling you to buy the stock, that it was a great investment.
The ninth best performer year to date is SVB Financial, don't you want? This company's a merchant bank with a deposit base that Wall Street had been mistakenly concerned about. SVB is the old Silicon Valley Bank. Recently bought one of our favorite research firms, Buffett and Nathanson, and it's become less dependent upon private equity and venture capitalist offerings.
At the same time, according to a report by the Times of Israel, Israel's two largest banks were able to transfer out, in fact, one day before the bank failed, Israel's two largest banks were able to transfer out $1 billion of funds in their accounts to bank accounts in Israel. So Bank Leumi and Bank Hapoalim set up a situation room to help their startup firms in Israel transfer money out of their accounts in SVB into accounts in those banks in Israel. $1 billion. This is before the feds seized the bank on the next day. And according to Bloomberg, venture capitalist Peter Thiel, his founders fund was able to withdraw millions of dollars from SVB, and he advised their clients of that fund to do the same thing. The very next day, the bank failed. There was a run on the bank. People tried to get their money out. In fact, other companies in the U.S. tried to wire money out of their accounts, and they weren't able to. So when people tried to get their own money out of their own bank accounts, NYPD was called in New York to stop them entering the bank. Here's another interesting fact. According to Reuters and ABC News, a U.S. judge ordered J.P. Morgan Chase to hand over documents concerning CEO of J.P. Morgan, Jamie Dimon, hand over documents to the U.S. Virgin Islands for a lawsuit that is taking place there accusing the bank in aiding in Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking. This is one day before the bank failed. Other banks are also implicated, including Deutsche Bank in Germany and Silicon Valley Bank and Bank Leumi, one of the Israeli banks that was able to transfer out $1 billion of funds the day before the bank crashed. That all happened on March 9th, the day before the failure. So now the FDIC and Joe Biden have stepped in and said they're going to back up all the funds that are still in SVB, and guarantee all the deposits. Unfortunately, the FDIC only has something like $125 billion. There's $175 billion worth of deposits in SVB alone. So if they bail out all those depositors, all those people who have bank accounts there, that's going to wipe out the entire FDIC fund. In fact, it's estimated there's $22 trillion of bank accounts in U.S. banks right now, and the FDIC's total fund is $125 billion to back up all those. So $22 trillion divided by $125 billion equals 0.005, or half of 1% of all bank accounts in America can actually be insured by the FDIC. And if they bail out all the SVB depositors, that's going to completely wipe out the FDIC. So obviously, the Fed is going to step in and print more money and devalue the dollar further and create more quantitative easing and increase inflation and increase interest rates. And they're going to back up all these deposits. You can see by this graphic put out by the Wall Street Journal that that all the major banks are linked together in a network called, and these are global systemically important banks, GSIBs as they're called. And I just found out about this. So GSIBs are all linked together in a network of borrowing money back and forth from Federal Reserve banks in Germany and the U.S., everywhere. And the Federal Reserve Bank, or the Reserve Bank in Switzerland, just bailed out Credit Suisse. So now this globally systemically important banks are all at risk due to the Federal Reserve in the U.S. printing so much money over the past 13 years. Obviously, the Federal Reserve banks are going to have to come in. They're going to buy the banks. They're going to take over. They're going to use taxpayer money to bail out these banks just like they did before. They're going to do bank bail-ins where they're going to take your deposits and give you shares in the bank, which may or may not be worthless. And what's happened over the last 13 years, the Fed has printed trillions of dollars and devalued our money and made all these banks at risk, made the whole entire financial system at risk. So they may be planning to wipe this out and come in with their digital currency that you've been hearing so much about.
And the reality, as the financial system gets more controlling and more invasive, it's a little bit like bringing up a corral around us. And CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, and vaccine passports or digital IDs are sort of the last shutting of the gate. It's hard for many people to imagine the risks here because we're so used to living with financial transaction freedom. And we don't understand that when this gate closes on us, we literally will be sitting in a system where the central banks believe that our assets belong to them and they can dictate where we can spend money and what we can spend money on. The important thing to understand is central bank digital currencies are not currencies. It's a financial transaction control grid, and it gives the ability for the central bankers, and they've said this publicly, the ability to not only set the rules centrally, but enforce the rules centrally. If you don't behave, you can have your money turned off.
Which is not a good thing, which means they'll know exactly what you're buying, who you are, what you're doing, everything. You're in total lockdown. It's coming. It looks like this bank run and this bank collapse is designed to make that happen. This is Crazy Horse. Thanks for watching.